I'll just keep an eye on the anybody else entering at the time. But so I'm really delighted to have two of our colleagues from the American University of the Caribbean, which I was very lucky to go and visit last year in, was it October, November? I can't even remember now. Which is it's an amazingly interesting university, and you'll hear more about what they're doing, and they can Natalie and Jalika can maybe tell you a bit of background about the university as well, whether you were planning on doing that anyway, but it might be quite useful. But just a phenomenally different sort of place to have a university, I think, as well, on a Caribbean island, which was incredibly beautiful and a really nice place to visit, as well as the great hospitality of Natalie and colleagues. It was really fun. Natalie was laughing at me staying in the hotel. It was like an all-inclusive hotel, which was like being on holiday while working, which was very exciting. But I am really delighted when we connected there, and I did some work with them, but also was said you have to come and tell us all about what you're doing and share your experiences with the best group. So I'm really happy that we've got time in the diary to be able to do that. So over to you, Natalie and Jalika, and people can leave cameras on if you want, but mics off, please.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jenny, for that lovely introduction. We are really excited to be sharing with you. We're going to be talking about behavioral science and social responsibility in medical education, some of the lessons that we learned from some curriculum innovation that's been going on here. But yeah, really excited to talk about this. My background is as a clinical and community psychologist. So I've been at, we call it AUC here for short, AUC for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was working also in a medical setting. So I was working at the Veterans Hospital in the US in Atlanta, and in primary care mental health integration. So patients would come into primary care to see their doctor, but I would be there to support and do brief therapy or intervene if, for example, a veteran patient had suicidal thoughts or substance use problem or those kind of concerns. So I'm used to being kind of in a medical home, which has challenges, of course, not feeling like it's entirely our home as a social scientist, but also really loving being in that setting. So that is similar here at AUC, a lot of joys and challenges that come with that. So we're hoping to learn from your experiences and share ours today. Natalie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself briefly?
Sure, I'm Natalie Humphrey, and my background is very similar to Jalika's in that I'm also a clinical psychologist, and most of my clinical career has been spent in kind of integrated care teams for patients with chronic illness with HIV, and also some time of my career spent doing clinical practice in different countries in the Caribbean. And I've been here at AUC for about 5 years. I started as a behavioral science instructor, and now my primary role is coordinating community engagement for the school, as well as part of our impacts curriculum, which is something that we're excited to tell you about and get a bit of your guys' advice on.
So before we move on from this slide, this is AUC, or part of our main campus on the front, the rainbow. I asked Natalie if she took this picture because I knew that this was, not a rare once in a lifetime occasion. We do have rainbows quite frequently. It's really a beautiful campus. So if you ever are on St. Martin, it's a small island, let us know and we'll be happy to show you around.
Yes, it's not photoshopped. It really does look like that.
So Natalie's going to share a bit more about our student body. We have a really diverse student population of students who are preparing to practice medicine in the US. And then we'll tell you more about that curriculum innovation that we I've been a part of and the AUC has innovated.
So about 100 years ago, there was this guy named Flexner in the United States who wrote this really comprehensive report on medical schools that he visited throughout the United States. And in that report, he said, this is what a medical school should look like. And these are some of the standards that we need to go by with our curriculum and with our student body. And in some ways, the Flexner report added some structure, but in other ways, it cut a lot of people out. There were a large number of medical schools that were shut down as a result of the Flexner report. And the students that started to get admission to medical school all started to look the same and be from similar socioeconomic backgrounds. And I bring this up because if we kind of fast forward 100 years from then, just to kind of share some of what's happening in America, if you look at US medical schools that are on our mainland, you'll notice that diversity is really limited. In the best case scenarios, some of the schools have up to 9% African American students, but African Americans make up about 13% of the population in the US. And Hispanic persons in the US make up an even larger population in the US and are even a smaller representation in US medical schools there on the right. And so one of the reasons that me and Jalika are really happy to be at AUC is that we're really unique in how diverse our student population is. We have students from rural areas in the States, students from cities, a variety of ethnic backgrounds and religions. Thank you for that applause. And it's really a pleasure to teach students that are from communities that have a lot of health disparities, and you just know these students are going to go back to those communities and provide good care. So for some time, AUC has been very unique in that we accept students that are otherwise rejected on the mainland. Our faculty do not have to publish to stay on faculty. We're evaluated just on teaching, but we're welcome to do research, yes. And so we can really dig in and spend a lot of time getting these students that are otherwise rejected up to par. So when they go back to mostly the US and Canada, they can compete. We have a campus on St. Martin, but we also have a campus at UCLan in the UK, which is like a second medical school on UCLan where the students come from all over the world with the goal of coming to the US to practice. So we can go to the next slide. And so that was kind of the stage of what AUC has been. And obviously around 2021, it wasn't just America, but also in the UK, people started thinking a lot more about social issues. In the United States, there was a pretty famous case of a man that was killed by the police, which led to a wave of protests and thinking about social justice issues. At that time, the CEO of our parent company who owns our school basically said, listen, we're a medical school. We have some responsibility as well. Think about, as a medical school, what you can contribute to increasing justice in medicine, because we know all people don't have equal access to good medical care. And historically, some things have happened in medicine. What can you as a school do to address that and play a role in that? And at that time, of course, it was during COVID and we were online and our students were having trouble kind of balancing what they were seeing on the news with medical school. And so for the next slide, we started to think about that. For me and Jalika, being in a medical school where your top deans and your board and your CEO is saying, hey, you need to do something about social justice in medicine. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, let's get it done, and let's get it done now. Because we really believe in striking while the iron is hot, right? We know that these priorities and initiatives come in waves. So our dean at that time, her name was Heidi Chumley, got a group of faculty together and said, hey, what do you guys want to do? How do you want to do it? When do you want to do it? Do it your way. Go ahead. And I had actually had a very tearful conversation with her because I had gotten some student evaluations of my teaching. And a couple of students said, hey, this faculty member has a social agenda and we don't like it. And it was all sorts of bad ratings, which we could all talk about later. And the dean at that time said, well, Natalie, I don't think you're doing a good job unless students are a little bit angry with you. I think you need to do more of this. I think we need to teach more on these topics. And so that really was an environment that really encouraged us to strike while the iron is hot. And so the next slide. We were also really fortunate because we had a really diverse faculty. We had a great advanced practice nurse. We had public health folks. We had very experienced MDs that had worked in environments where they taught on social justice issues. We had ethics experts. And there was a group of about 10 faculty that did some focus groups with students and faculty. And what the students said to us is, well, we want a task force to kind of look at the curriculum and look at how well are you guys preparing us to be physicians that give socially equitable medicine. And we want you to do something. Now, the timing was also right for that because our school had decided to move from a subjects-based curriculum to an organ systems-based curriculum. So as we were building a new curriculum, we decided to do something that we called a thread. And Dr. Breaux will talk more about that, but we decided to develop some curriculum on this stuff. Next slide. We thought about the longevity of this curriculum. Is this just kind of where the mood is?
On?
Is this kind of just where the mood is, or can we make this last? So we said, okay, let's create this curriculum and let's link it with the core competencies that they want U.S. residents and trainees to have when they start to practice medicine. And that's where we begin. And if we move forward, I think Dr. Breaux is going to tell you a little bit about what we developed.
Yes. So thank you so much, Natalie, for the background. She's the perfect person because she was really there as this was developed. As I said, I joined about 2 years ago. So I joined kind of mid what we have referred to as the new curriculum, although really it's not new anymore. We just call it the integrated curriculum. So 2020 was a year of a lot of change, internationally, nationally in the US, in the St. Martin context, probably in many of our lives as well. And as Natalie's mentioned, there was this transition to the organ systems-based curriculum, as well as the inclusion of what we call IMPACTS. And so that IMPACTS is an acronym that stands for Integrated Medicine, Public Health, Advocacy, Care, Trust, and Systems of Health. And initially was designed to be about 10 hours of learning into each of the modules that I'll describe in a minute to discuss these various topics that you may, generally lump under social sciences or behavioral science, although of course they touch on a lot of different disciplines. So just to give you more of a sense of what our curriculum looks like, students do 16 weeks in the beginning of their first year of what's called Molecules to Medicine. This is very focused on genetics and biochemistry and other foundations of medicine, but then also IMPACTS was integrated in this. So they learn about development. There's some some introduction to ethics, really all of the IMPACTS. We also provide some foundational knowledge and experience for students right there in their first year of medical school. And then students will transition to taking hematology oncology, also musculoskeletal derm, and progressed through their 2 years on the St. Martin campus. Although, of course, at the time it was some hybrid learning going on due to COVID, but progressed through until they take brain and behavior, the final module at the end, and clinical reason to prepare for some of their exams. So this is generally, what the 2 years looks like in our integrated curriculum that continues today. And so I told you what impacts the word stands for, but to give you a better sense of all that we're trying to cover, which is quite ambitious, but a wonderful goal and practice, where we talk about structural and social determinants of health, diversity, inclusion and social justice, personal and professional wellness, really getting students to reflect on, how they're taking care of their bodies, how that will impact their clinical practice, kind of that self-awareness piece, community engagement. As Natalie mentioned, she's our wonderful Dean of Community Engagement and does wonderful activities to help students connect to the St. Martin community, participate in health screenings, educational events, all kinds of interaction with the people of St. Martin. We also talk about interpersonal communication skills, things like motivational interviewing, how to deal with difficult patients and deliver difficult news. We talk about systems-based practice and how, of course, that impacts medical outcomes. Biostats and epidemiology are a piece that students are learning, and then ethics is a part. So again, a lot of different disciplines all trying to come together around that theme of, social sciences, social justice, helping kind of round out what we call basic sciences at AUC, right from day one of their medical school experience. How do we do this? So we try to use all of our good, diverse teaching skills. It's a variety of hands-on learning. Things like for wellness, for example, they might reflect on how they're taking care of themselves at different time points throughout the curriculum, and have more reflection pieces. There might be clinical simulations where I'll show you some of these different activities. We won't be able to describe them all, but then of course also trying to integrate in things like assessment, and we've had lots of debates and are curious on your thoughts on all the ways that it is difficult to assess these skills, or there may be better or worse ways to assess. So there's been, we have exam questions, but also things that are more reflection-based or activity-based. So just to give you a bit more insight into what some of these impacts activities look like, for example, early in their first week of medical school, students attend a class originally designed as a 3-hour activity where students would be introduced to the impacts threads, as we might call them, the different subjects that are a part of impacts. They get to meet a patient that is then followed throughout parts of their medical education. This is designed to be a local person from St. Martin who has some health concerns, and then they think about him from a social justice lens, from an ethics lens, him and his community, and watch video of him on the island interacting with his community. So that's kind of their introduction, and then from there, that is woven throughout the curriculum, either thinking about him as a patient, or again, his community, or doing other types of learning activities. So that's the Make an Impact Introduction to Impacts. Again, just to give you a flavor of some of the other activities, this is a picture of students engaging in which is actually designed as a board game. It's called Friday Night at the ER, where students learn about systems-based practice and the importance of, they're working as a team as they play this game, but then also learning about a simulated hospital on a Friday night and how patients are pouring into the healthcare setting, and decisions about triage and staffing and those kind of things need to be made that impact the performance of the hospital and patient outcomes. So that's one example of what we might call a simulation that touches on systems-based practice, also some equity concerns, and has, been an enjoyable activity, of course, for students, but they're also learning a lot. Another example of an activity that's a part of the impacts curriculum is, they have a specific reading from this book, Medical Apartheid. They are to discuss it in small groups and have some reflection, both individually and in a class setting. Poverty simulation is another activity that was originally designed as a part of the impacts curriculum. This is a activity where a whole community is actually simulated through the use of our standardized patients. Each student would take on a role as a member of a family who is challenged by economic circumstances and have to interact with the community, so they would have to go to work or get food for their family or other things, all a part of this simulation, and then do some reflecting and debriefing about challenges they encountered as a part of this system, and assessing, kind of before and after how this might impact their views of, people who are living in poverty and the challenges they might face. So really wonderful and engaging activity. This is an example of one of the wellness activities that Natalie has taken a lead on. So students reflect on different aspects of their wellness, as I said, at different points throughout the curriculum. So we have some introduction in the beginning and at different points, some mindfulness exercises and other kind of small bites on personal wellness. And then at the end, also help them reflect and think forward about how they might apply this as they move towards clinicals. So as we know, burnout is such a common problem, a very valuable activity in that sense. All right, and then I think of one or two more examples. Another activity that Natalie leads in terms of community engagement. They are often working, with community members, but this is more of an in-class activity where the students look and critique at different health education videos as some examples, and then they have to actually create their own in a way that may be developed with a partnering St. Martin organization. So really thinking about health messaging and how to create effective health messages and their role in that as a medical provider. So how have students responded? We tried to collect some, outcome data, got some really valuable and really warm reception. Generally students that recognize the importance of having this as a part of their curriculum, recognizing that, it allowed them time for personal reflection, for really fueling the why of why they came to medical school and helping them connect to that, even when they're feeling in the weeds with some of the nitty-gritty of biochemistry or other subjects that maybe involve a lot of memorization or other things that could be challenging. But, students really valued the impacts curriculum and, seem to develop in many different ways personally and professionally from the curriculum. So that was great feedback. And we continue to try to get feedback from students, at the conclusion of most of our activities. We get that kind of real-time feedback and have been modifying the curriculum as a response to that. So I'll turn it back over to you, Natalie, to talk about some of the ways this has changed over time.
Sure. And Jalika, that was wonderful. I think also it might be good for us to add that what was really supportive is that the impact curriculum sessions are mandatory. And for most U.S. medical schools, attendance to the actual class session is not required. If you want to use the online learning modules or listen to recordings of class, students are given that option. But when it comes to those impact sessions and material, that has not been optional to students, which is a really great way that the school has kind of really helped students understand what we value in them as physicians. And so we talked about catching that wave and going for it, and we did. And it was great, and struck it while the iron was hot, and then the waves shifted a bit, and I think that we all pride ourselves on educators as not kind of responding directly to what's happening in our political environments. And I think AUC certainly been committed to that. But just for some context, in the US, like many places in the world, diversity and equity has been really challenged in higher education. There's actually a couple of states in the United States in the last year who have said that colleges that are federally funded could not use any of those federal funds to teach on anything related to diversity and equity. So that has been something for us as instructors that has been kind of in the back of our minds and maybe even triggering a little bit as we've been teaching this curriculum. And we also saw all over the United States with American and Canadian medical students a shift in their capacity to perform well on standardized tests for a number of reasons. But it really led us as a university to think ahead about how we can ensure that our students are performing well so that they can be competitive when they are applying for their residency training. There was also a major shift in how the US medical system looks at testing of medical students to know whether or not they're ready to enter the clinical arena. And while some of those tests were previously score-based, those allowed some of our top students to really stand out. There are quite a few stereotypes about Caribbean medical students, that these are not students that can live up to the mold. But when our students were having these very strong test scores, that was very helpful. But now the tests are kind of pass, fail. And so our students aren't given those same opportunities to shine in that way. And that really increased our school's attention to, okay, we've got to make sure that we're really preparing them for these standardized tests. And as you can guess, probably about 50% of the content of what we're teaching with impacts are on standardized exams. But most of our assessments were those reflections, their activities in the classroom, their engagement and critical thinking on the topics. And so there was a lot of push to start testing some of these concepts with multiple choice questions. And oh my goodness, developing a multiple choice question on how to assess for social determinants of health has been a fun adventure. I think that's the best way I can say it. Because our students, when they come to those multiple choice questions, are used to thinking very objectively, and we're talking about some very subjective concepts here. So Jalika's going to tell, we're going to go and talk a little bit about the changes, but we wanted to give you kind of a heads up that it was a little bit of what was going on outside of the university, what was changing in terms of medical education in the US, that really led our faculty to take another look at our impacts and think things through a little bit differently.
Right. So to give you a sense of where Impacts is today, still based on the strong foundation that was started, as I mentioned, it's not brand new anymore. So we've been able to take in student and faculty feedback and continue to improve some of the activities. But also there was some challenges with time, right? So in some of the modules, there was decisions to have less time or change the amount of time that the impacts topics could be taught. And assessment was also a question. So, we were doing reflections or a variety. We had both multiple choice questions kind of built in from the beginning, and some more of the reflective type assessments. And there's been shifts. We tried to fit into tests, and sometimes that worked really well because it's consistent with the kind of test questions that they'll get on USMLE style questions or tests. And some of it didn't quite fit, or we didn't think it was the best way to we wanted students to be having this experience, to be having this critical thinking experience, but it wasn't really designed to be, something that was tested in a multiple choice question. So there's been shifts back and forth and lots of discussion about how to test, what topics, are best lend themselves to, multiple choice type assessments versus other more narrative, subjective forms of assessment. And I know that that is a theme, I think, from other medical schools and faculty that I've talked to. There's also been lots of changes, of course, with faculty and leadership. And so a challenge has been trying to figure out how because it was a diverse interdisciplinary team that really developed the curriculum. If we lose any member of that team, it can feel like there's gaps or holes or in how the impacts curriculum is administered. So just lots of always trying to figure out how to carry impacts forward and not have it be about a certain faculty member or just based on a certain leader being super supportive or needing some education on it and the importance of it. So a challenge, I'd say, overall for the curriculum where it stands today. So what have we done about this? Natalie will share a little bit about, how we've tried to maintain the impacts curriculum, and then I think we'll pretty much open it up to questions and discussion in a bit.
Okay. Well, one exciting thing that we also started to focus on at AUC was interprofessional education. The idea of medical students learning about things with students from other professions in the same room doing the same activity. And that has really strengthened impacts in some ways. So for example, the Friday night at the ER is now taught alongside local nursing students, and seeing the dynamics play out between our students and the nursing students on that systems-based activity has really added enthusiasm with other faculty members to kind of pull them in on what Impacts is doing. As Impacts started, we were kind of focusing on our passions. We had a public health person, an epidemiologist, really focused on applying biostats to a food security study, for example, that all the students were involved in. And as Jalika was saying, we were very deliberate about mapping these things to competencies that you want to see in doctors as they move into clinicals. And so that has required all of us to do a little bit of continuing education and getting into those conference spaces and conversations with like-minded faculty, even outside of AUC, like me and Jalika are doing today, to kind of get invigorated and get ideas. We've also had patient experiences integrated into the classroom. We even had some patients come and speak with our students about their experiences in terms of health disparities. And we've been really actively involved in integrated cases where we might present a case alongside with a physician and alongside with someone that specializes in biochemistry and looking at that case from all perspectives. And so being able to contribute to who those people are in those cases and those cases stories has been helpful for sustaining. We also, this isn't on the slide, but we also, we have various departments in any institution, and our institution is kind of divided by what we call basic science faculty and clinical science faculty, and the social sciences kind of fall under the clinical science faculty. But we've actually created a bit of a subgroup of faculty that teach in Impacts, and if there is a member of our team that's departing, we'll go out to dinner and just kind of reflect on where we are. We meet weekly and we talk about the rollout of the curriculum and how it went, and generating ideas and sharing resources. And so that is where we are. A time of some change and transition even in our leadership team. And so this is where we really want to get some feedback from you guys about similar experiences that you've had, and two questions that are really on our mind that we would love feedback on is, in your institutions, how your social science faculty, how do you maintain the buy-in from basic science faculty over time, especially when there's new faculty coming in? And yeah, so we can open it up for discussion. I will look at the chat as well as anyone that wants to turn your camera on and weigh in.
Do we want to keep the slides up, or should I?
I think we could take them down.
Yeah, I think you can take them down now, unless anybody wants them back up. Thank you so much. That was just really fascinating and inspirational, I think, in so many ways. I was quite sad when you went into the changes part, though, because it was just looking so amazing, but I think still is. So I'm not going to hog any questions, because I've already had a lot of chance to speak to you and learn more. So I'm going to invite everybody else.
And also questions as well. Yes, we're open.
Questions or comments in response to your own questions that you've posed, that you want to hear from other people.
Margaret?
Margaret.
Thank you very much to both of you. I am impressed. I'm happy for you. My heart is like, I'm really happy. I'm from Austria. I used to organize a model called Diversity in Medicine. I still teach in healthcare, and also since very long. And I led an European group medical anthropologists who were teaching in health. And what I can say is you have won something that is very special for the European context, because you have it implemented throughout the whole curriculum. And this is something very, very important. And yeah, it's amazing that you got that. And where I worked, we could not do that. We were in the 6th semester, and we were just like, put on the side. I would like to know, are you also teaching the structural competency training, the one that the guys in Berkeley and around developed? Do you hear about that?
I have not heard about it, and I would love if you would share. And I think you're referring to like sexual history taking. No? Oh, please.
No.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I leave it here for you.
Okay.
So basically, on the critique of cultural competency, a team of people developed this other form of concept of competency. And it is, and this is what I like, a 3 hours training for students and health professionals. And you can use it for all different types of health professionals. You can teach it in groups where only medical students are, but also in mixed groups. And I think this would perfectly fit your purpose. And especially because you are already so far, from my perspective, to have this view of structural competency in your training.
Okay,
thank you very much.
I look forward
Yeah, I'm excited to have that. And
Thanks.
one of those topics that we've changed how we've taught it, and so, or we're shifting and always looking for new input and the best way to try to build that competency in students or discuss. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for your enthusiasm. I saw you cheering there in the background. That's much appreciated.
A little anecdote that is pertinent here around structural competency. I was at a conference in January, and I met a guy from Vanderbilt who was presenting on integration, the integrated curriculum. And I did kind of question in his integration where the social behavioural sciences were. They didn't seem to be that present. And I said, how have you connected with Jonathan Metzl, who's one of the leading proponents and leading author around structural competency at his own university? He'd never even heard of him. So I think it just highlights the silos even within your field. So he was quite, I'll definitely check him out. But so that great resource, but it just flags up again that some of the challenges around integration, I think, as well.
Beautiful.
I think Kathy's got a question, and then there's a question in the chat from Jennifer, but we'll go to Kathy first.
Oh, thank you so much. That is so inspiring. I just want to hear more, and maybe another time I can find out more details about all the amazing work that you're doing and how you managed to do it. One of I think my key questions is with regard to the poverty simulation game that you said. I wondered if you might tell us a bit more about that. I mean, in my experience, I think I find it, the students find it hardest to kind of grasp, to understand. You know, when we talk about social determinants of health inequalities, what that means in practice. And it sounds like you maybe found a means to do that. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, a couple of things about that. So when we first did the poverty simulation, it was actually prior to impacts being developed, and it didn't go well at all. Students were very angry. They said that this stereotypes people living in poverty. A lot of our students that came from poverty said this is not realistic. There were students that didn't take the activity seriously and just kind of took it as a fun game. And there was about like a 2-year lull where it was never done again. We brought it back with impacts and we added a reflection component to it, a debrief. Immediately after the simulation, we went into small groups with our impacts faculty and gave students a chance to say, you know, what happened on your group? Did you do anything that wasn't in line with your values? What were the stressors that you were experiencing in your family? What does that have to do with what you've personally experienced? And what does that have to do with being a doctor? One of the questions we would ask them is, okay, so all of this went on with your family. Did you guys visit the local clinic? No. And why? And then we would wrap that up into kind of the social determinants of health and leading them to kind of understand and think about, so what's your role as a doctor to address these things with your patient? And then after that, we would get kind of quantitative feedback from the students. And at that point, it was really well received. You know, one of the questions in the chats is, and it's in line with yours, Kathleen, did the success of the program have anything to do with the background of our students? Yeah, there were students in the room that are like all for this and this is very helpful to me, but there's always students that were like, this is nonsense and I'm not interested in learning it and I don't think it's real. And the small groups gave a chance for not us to challenge them, but for their classmates who are from a variety of backgrounds, and I guess that's the strength of diversity, to say, no, 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 no. Please consider thinking about it in this way. We do have to tell you that the Friday night at the ER still happens, but it's voluntary, and we typically do have good turnout for the students that are interested. And the poverty simulation has been put on hold due to the number of simulated patients we need for funding. You know, one of the ways that we kind of deal with that is we have it. It's a very structured program, and the tides will call it back, and we'll be ready when that time comes. But we also have the option of doing those things as extracurriculars.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
And I will share too that it was a whole, like it is a structured activity that was purchased by the lead or is available. So we could also get you the information on specifically the activity. You know, it's not something that was fully created by AUC faculty. We tried to, you know, deliver it with fidelity to how it was built, but that did require 3 or so couple hours of students' time. And of course, you know, that's a challenge when, you know, we're strapped for time or.
You've answered the question in the chat. Margaret's just also put stuff in there, but Suhad.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much. This is very much inspiring and amazing. Well done. To be honest, I have a comment, and I don't know, always I ask myself, how would I manage being or teaching social sciences in a curriculum which is not problem-based one, because the last 9 years, this is actually what I did, teaching social sciences in a problem-based curricula. And I think those who are doing that are very much privileged as social and behavioral scientists, because I think the fact that we build the stems or the scenarios for the problem-based learning the cases themselves, being integrated or invited to take part in so many things, such as, you know, the experiential learning sessions, the interprofessional education sessions. I think there is a plus of having maybe some component of problem-based learning curriculum within the core curriculum. And for me, I found it very much helpful, to be honest. And taking a lead on key activities within the medical school that they cannot function without, such as this IPE, which is now almost every med school has them, or the experiential learning, to lead these sessions and to have the touch. And sometimes I find it like, I don't want to sound kind of, you know, aggressive, but sometimes we have to force or to impose the things and to fight for our voices and our impact, because the other side, or with all due respect, let's say those who come from biomedical sciences, it's just that they don't know or they don't have the language. It's not from bad intentions. And I feel sometimes maybe we need kind of, you know, training how to train them. So this is, yeah, it's like, you know, I feel it kind of dynamics that, you know, pulling and pushing all the time. My question is, when you, since you're students, let's say, coming from population that is very much relevant to the content of the curriculum that you are trying to deliver, to what extent do you feel that they are really very much, let's say, have this passion to make a change within the content of the curriculum, the textbooks? If we take, for example, decolonizing the curriculum and talking about, if we take an example, you know, textbooks that on dermatology, for example, do they like develop kind of, you know, future vision to change some of the, you know, academic content for future medical students, or is this something that is too much maybe to expect them to do? But I think within this uniqueness of your, I think, program, you might expect some students like having these passions or desire to do something to make some change in the future.
Yeah, I think our students are really passionate, you know, and have contributed a lot in terms of feedback on the curriculum, in terms of expanding our curriculum. Students are really involved in student interest groups, and that's often a way that they'll kind of bring to faculty ideas that they have or things that they're not seeing in the curriculum that they want all students to know. So I'd say it, you know, we definitely, you know, and it's not all students, right? So, but I think we have really engaged students. I think that Impacts helps connect them. Often we'll get feedback like, we're so glad we talked about this. This has reminded me why I'm in medical school. So I think we do help them remember that, but then they also vacillate between that and being just so overwhelmed by medical school and all of the information and content that they are learning. And so I think that poses a real challenge to, you know, at times how more or less engaged they may be. You know, before an exam, they all disappear and are studying really hard and can't necessarily carry forward some of the curriculum change that they want to be involved in, or larger, you know, community engagement. And then they, other times they have a lot of energy to contribute to that. But that's, you know, that's one of the best parts of working at AUC, is the engagement of the students, the interests of the students, the diversity of the students. Yeah, that's what I love about it. But.
Yeah, I think that's I would agree with Jalika. There's one student organization I was thinking of in particular that developed some in-office clinical interventions for non-English speaking patients, and they kind of integrated some of the principles of what they learned in the classroom into developing this kind of program that's going to carry on in the community. And I'd say that that's like, you know, 5% of the students just really get revved up and they start to do something. But yeah, I agree, Jalika. There was a student that said to me the other day that, you know, I appreciate impacts and I know it's important, but some days I'm just so overwhelmed. And one day I got to class and thought, why, this is all so common sense to me. Why do we have to spend an hour on this concept? And she said, but then I heard my classmates say the most ridiculous, hateful thing. And then I was like, oh, that's why we have to do this. And I think that's kind of sums it up with the variety that we have.
To that, it chimes with all of us who've had that similar sort of experience. I think we've time definitely for one more question. There's a question in the chat from Sakib saying, excellent, good work, really appreciate it. Can you please explain a little about how you're moving from subjective to objective assessment? Isn't that difficult? So, apart from yes being the answer, maybe we probably all have similar sort of concerns. So it would be interesting to hear from your perspective how that's going.
I want to say that we're not moving from subjective to objective, but we've added objective. That's actually the subjective assessment and the reflection assignments. Those are all still there, and they're part of our online learning modules, and they kind of have to do them after the class session or during the class session. So like we have a class session where they have to kind of put in the region where they're from and look at health outcomes from their own neighborhood and think about their risk and resilience, right? They do that in the class, and then we have a discussion that's still there. But now we have added that that's going to be tested on the exam, cardiovascular risk and resilience. And yeah, I have to make up question stems about people who have all these characteristics and what might be their greatest risk for cardiovascular illness. And I would say about 98% of the students get the question right. And because it's, you know, common sense at that point. And I have been asked to make the questions more difficult. And the question that I've had for the basic science faculty is, should we really be doing gotcha questions on a concept that we want the students to buy into and have lifelong learning on, and is not on their standardized exam? Do we really want to catch them with that, or could that, you know? And so I kind of fluctuate and not being sure what to do with that. I don't know, Dr. Breaux, if you want to jump in, or if anyone has any thoughts about that. Would love some advice.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I'd say I've seen it go back and forth for different topics. Right now, we had students do a cultural interview and were asked to create some multiple choice questions around it. You know, I think the activity is the beneficial part, you know, but I'm glad that multiple choice questions might get students really studying it. They may see questions similar, you know, they may see questions where they have to consider cultural diversity implied concepts. So it's just a challenge. We're you know, and it goes back and forth. So we're currently trying to figure out, to highlight the importance and help them integrate this information, you know, create the multiple choice question. What are the pros and cons? I don't think that there's one right answer, but it certainly is a challenge.
Carrie, I don't know if you want to come in on that.
Yeah, thank you both. Great to hear about how Impacts is going. I'm at their sister institution in Barbados. And I just, on that, in terms of like assessment, we've been playing with this as well. And just last semester, we made, so we do a bunch of different things, but not as well organized as Impacts, but kind of all of them as well. But we also do an anti-racism reading program, and now accompanied clinical case session as well, like a problem-based learning kind of session. And what we landed on last semester is making assessment, making things count for something. And we have found that to super increase the engagement around it. So, you know, it's really not important that you answer this multiple choice correctly. So when it comes to MCQs, we kind of keep it only like the type of things that you wouldn't maybe see on NBME. But before our before our anti-racism reading session, we do a pre-assessment. And so you have to complete it before you come to get like you know, a fraction of a point on your grade, but they care about all of the points. So it's not about getting it right. It's about, you know, did you answer this question, you know, good enough? Did you think about it? Did you do the reading, et cetera, et cetera? So finding ways to assess and like give small credit towards those things that we just want them to engage with it, right? And think about it a little bit. I don't really care if you get this multiple choice question correct or not. So we're still playing with it. But just like the first semester of doing that has gone really well in terms of our engagement and students, like at least reading their responses and like doing the reading and like showing up to their small group discussions, having done the reading and having more to say, because we do just kind of do that small check-in that you actually do it before you come into the group. So yeah, I'm still puzzling with it too. Just ideas.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carrie. That's really helpful. I think it's something that we all, none of us, I think, have got the, I could probably safely say the answer for you. I think what you're experiencing is what we all experience in terms of the importance of assessment as the tail that wags the dog in terms of what we do and student response. And without a link to assessment, I think we know that student engagement goes down in everything, and it's not just our subjects, but I guess we struggle a little bit more because there's not as much of a presence in knowledge tests, or it's much more difficult for all the reasons you've already said. So this is something that we talk about a lot within BEST, and I think we'll do going forward. So I think we're pretty much out of time now. It's just been such a fascinating session. I think we probably all could have loads more questions to ask you, but hopefully this is just the start of engagement and future conversations that we'll all have. I'm really delighted to have you on board, and Carrie as well, obviously from Ross University in Barbados. It's really nice to have you all involved and to hear what you're doing. Future activities for BEST we've got coming up, not dates yet, but planned, show and tell around patient and public involvement, and one around integration that Tracy's going to do, maybe a workshop with us, I think, thinking around integration, which I think will be good to sort of flesh out some of those ideas a little bit more, the concepts and the ideas and how they work out in practice for us. So lots of things happening. Thanks everybody, and really good to see you all. Hopefully catch up again soon.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.